This tool is an Ames Lettering guide. It is a special tool that has been developed to assist the drafter in putting guidelines onto their drawings for the lettering. Down this side of the lettering guide is a series of holes that are spaced 1/8 of an inch apart. On the center dial there are also rows of holes. This one, the second from the bottom, is also evenly spaced. If we zoom in on this, you'll see that at the very bottom of the dial there's a set of numbers. These numbers represent 64ths of an inch. And right now our dial is lined up with this mark in the very center here, and that mark is lined up with the number 4 mark up above, meaning that the rows of holes on the dial are currently set at 4/64ths of an inch. Well, 4/64ths of an inch is the same as 1/16 of an inch. Now let me show you how this lettering guide is to be used. Okay, here's a page that has some notes on the left. If I wanted to transfer those notes over to the right side of the page, before I would do that, I would need to put some guidelines on to help me control the height of the notes and to keep the rows nice and straight. So I would take the Ames Lettering Guide, and using my horizontal slider, I would line up the top hole with the top of my note. Slide over to where I want the note to be, place my pencil with a 6H lead in the top hole, and drag it across. Slide it back, put it in the next hole down, and just repeat this process until I have enough guidelines to letter that note. Okay, now I've got 2 guidelines to letter the first line of the note. Then I would leave a space, and then I would letter the second part of the note on the bottom 2 guidelines. And you see how easy it was to put those on, and they're nice and evenly spaced. Well, occasionally you have fractions that need to also be lettered. Fractions require some extra guidelines. And so that's where the row of holes on the dial comes into play. If we set the guide so that it is lined up with the number 4 mark, that would set this row of holes so that they were spaced 1/16 of an inch apart, and that's what we need for fractions. So I would follow the same kind of a process. I'd slide over here and line it up so that one of the holes is lined up with the very bottom hole on my dial there, on the row that I'm going to use. And now I'll slide over here, and I'll need 5 rows of guidelines, and so I'll put one for the bottom, go up a hole, put another one, slide it back, go up another hole, put another line, and continue doing that until I have my 5 lines that I need for the fractions. Okay, you can see that now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. Okay, so if I was gonna letter part of that note, you notice that the first part of the note is a fraction, 5/32. And so the first thing I would want to darken would be where the division bar is going to go. So I've got the division bar darkened in, and then I'll carefully letter the 5. Trying to leave a little bit of space right next to the division bar. And then I would go down below and letter the 3 and the 2. Taking my time to try and shape my letters properly. so that they conform to the standard. So you can see that I've got my 5 and I've got my 32. Now if I was going to continue with the words, I would use these two lines to letter the words. So let me just put a couple of the letters here. We'll start with the D. We'll do the R. I. And then the two L's. Being very careful to keep them between the guidelines and to make them conform to the proper shape. Now let me zoom up just a little bit so that you can see that on the fraction I've left a little bit of space below the 5 and a little bit above the 3 and the 2 so that they don't touch the division bar. That's what you want to do when you're lettering fractions. And so that's all there is to it. To put guidelines in, if we need evenly spaced guidelines that are 1/8 of an inch apart, then we'll use this row of holes. If we need guidelines for our fractions, then we'll set the dial to 4 and use the second to the bottom row of holes, and those will be 1/16 of an inch apart, which will give us 5 lines that are spaced 1/16 of an inch apart.